She's got it. PNC.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. So there's a few topics and questions that I get asked pretty regularly, and what nutrients do I use has to be at the top of the list currently. And it's a great question, and I do my best to answer it in every update briefly, as well as I have a few dedicated updates. But it's 2018. I understand things get buried, and it's time to get you guys the newest, most up to date, and a little more thorough and full analysis for Jack's Hydro and the 3-2-1 recipe that we all know and love out there. So I'm never secretive about it. The product that I use is called Jack's Hydroponic, and it is a complete 2-part hydroponic dry nutrient line. And so what that means real quick, I'm just going to blow through this. To be complete, there's 17 essential elements needed for plant growth. 3 of them are supplied from water and the air via CO2, and the other 14 we supply from the nutrient recipes that we give, some more complete than others. To be a fully complete one, it's going to supply all 14 of those, and that's basically what Jack's here does. 2 parts, has a couple things to it. Has to do with nutrient stability as well as tunability and adjustability of the formula. So that's why it's in a 2-part, basically because of calcium stability, so it separates the calcium from any sulfur containing parts. But what that also allows us to do is manipulate, adjust, and tune the formula very specifically and accurately with manipulation of separate parts. To be hydroponic, I do not want that to confuse people. It doesn't mean it can only be used in a hydroponic system. This can be used in any media or growing system. Cocoa, peat, rock wool, flood and drain, DWC, soil, peat, whatever it is, it can be used. The reason it's called hydroponic is because it's 100% water soluble and plant available forms of these nutrients, as we're in organic or metabolite powered systems. You have to rely on bacteria to convert some things and other things. That's just in a hydroponic system. We go straight to the point. So you can think of hydroponic nutrients as a square. A square can be a rectangle, since hydro can be used in soil, but soil cannot go the other way around, or organics cannot go the other way around and be used in a hydro system. So that's why it's designated a hydroponic nutrient line. And the last is to be a dry or a salt or an ion-based mix. And I just want to clear up what a nutrient or an ion salt is the purest form of one or more of these. They're so pure that they have a crystalline or a crystal-like structure to them when they're in their dry form. The thing with these are, so like all of these are all salts. A mixture of salt. Calcium nitrate is a salt of calcium and nitrate. Magnesium sulfate or Epsom salt is magnesium and sulfur combined. Anyway, once these are dissolved, or any salt is dissolved in water, they're no longer salts. Calcium nitrate is put into water as calcium nitrate. It then dissolves into calcium and nitrogen in their most available forms. So a salt or a salt-based nutrients, it's not a carrier. I think the misconception is a lot of people have this idea that just like microbial products, nutrients are carried on salt, and once the nutrients is gone, salt is left over. If you have salt left over, that means that your solution is drying out quicker than your plants can take it out of there, and thus there's an imbalance, and nutrients are not salty. You are then a salty feeder at that point. So those are the clarifications I want to make going forward. Now let's get into the 3-2-1 formula and what that means, how much of it, how often, all that good stuff. So Jack's Hydro and the 3-2-1 recipe. Now those 3-2-1 numbers don't refer to an NPK ratio or anything like that. What they actually refer to is the ratio or the parts at which we're going to apply each one of these products here. So we have Jack's Hydro, calcium nitrate, and magnesium sulfate, aka Epsom salt here. And again, these apply to the ratio. So 3 to 2 to 1, or 3 out of 6 parts to 2 out of 6 parts to 1 out of 6 parts. And that is what the 3-2-1 means. It means those ratios, and that is very important. So if you wanted to increase strength or decrease strength, you're going to do it according to that ratio. Now, what is actually kind of considered full strength, and I found it out on my own. Little did I know, if I had just read the instructions on the bottle and not exactly had gone with my thoughts of 3-2-1 exactly, the basic reading that I did on forums and this and that. Long story short, if I were to just read on Jack's website or the back of the container that it comes with, it would have pointed me directly to full strength in the first place. And full strength is 3.6 grams of Jack's, 2.4 grams of calcium nitrate, and 1.2 grams of Epsom salt. And when it's applied at full strength as such, it'll give you a nutrient ratio that looks just like. All right, so it seems like just a jumble of numbers to most of you out there, but let me try to break it down and point you in the right direction to make some sense out of all this. So first off, let's look at the NPK ratio. The NPK ratio for Jack's Hydro in the 3-to-1 formula comes out to a 3-1-4 ratio. And that is extremely important for a couple of reasons here. First, it's the probably one of, if not the most widely successful, broad range, and thus widely used formula in all of hydroponics and growing and agriculture. It's extremely successful on pretty much anything you throw it at, and I say extremely successful as in it's basically the benchmark or competing to be the benchmark for what you should be feeding each one of these specific crops. Now, if we go even further, what makes it even more important to us is there are very few cannabis-specific profiles recommended out there at all, let alone with any kind of major backing. The 314 profile is recommended by Mel Frank himself. If you got to go look up Mel Frank, go ahead, but he's one of the leaders in cannabis for the last 40, 50 years, him and Robert Clark. Anyway, he recommends the 314 profile specifically for cannabis. That's huge. And it shows in the success that I've had and everyone else, but to have those behind the NPK ratios is fantastic. Now we move on real quickly to the secondaries, magnesium, calcium, and sulfur here. These are just as important elements here. Sulfur, a little less here. Sulfur is basically a flavor or a quality enhancer. The plant needs it. It's definitely a requirement, but once we get to a certain point, it kind of more or less becomes inert. But the other ones, magnesium and calcium, extremely, extremely important. And one of the biggest questions we get about this formula is, do you add CalMag or do you add anything else? No, this is a complete formula, and what substances such as CalMag are made of, we're adding. CalMag is made of calcium nitrate and usually magnesium nitrate because these don't get along, or it's made from magnesium sulfate and like calcium carbonate, which is the best form of calcium. We have the two best forms of these elements, and we're applying them directly to our formula in what is important and what is needed. Now, if you need a little less magnesium, we use a little less magnesium sulfate here. If you need a little less calcium or a little more calcium, we adjust the calcium nitrate. And that's how we're able to do it. Now, before I go any farther, CalMag is not an element. And if you have an issue with calcium or magnesium, you need to be addressing these specifically on their own and not in some paired form that maintains a ratio, because ratios are only a starting point. If you're using a ratio and your plants are telling you it's wrong, guess what, guys? It's wrong, and you need to adjust accordingly. And so magnesium, for instance, I don't stick to the 2-to-1 calcium to magnesium ratio because my plants require more magnesium. So if you notice here, you do the ratio, I'm up at closer to probably like 0.75 or 1.2 to 1, however you want to look at it, but basically using 1.2 times as much calcium as I am magnesium here. And that's what my plants require. And this again is a great complete starting base. We'll compare in a little bit here to some other profiles and you'll notice low numbers, but to those profiles we're going to have to add things. Again, Jax, we're not adding CalMag, and if we do, we have the elements to adjust if we need to make adjustments. So that's your secondaries. Lastly, we have all the micros. Oh, that was horrible. Excuse me, guys. All the micros. Sulfur's not even part of that. So the part about Jax, what makes Jax so great, is that it has all these in a already balanced ratio and good amounts. I can take potassium nitrate, MKP, maybe some MAP, and I can create a great NPK ratio to easily match Jax. But what I can't do is have all the salts, to have all these additional microbes, or micros, I keep calling them the same microbes, excuse me, micronutrients here, iron, zinc, boron, copper, molybdenum, manganese, and then silica, sodium, and chloride we're going to talk about here. But to have all these in here in the correct parts, that is hard to do because they're in such small amounts. So if you're mixing for a field, yeah, you have no problem getting this much molybdenum or something. But for the amounts that we mix in to have a product that'll supply all the micros in a nice balanced diet here, that's what Jax does. And so that's why it's so important in addition to just its NPK, and then we're filling it in with others. So if you're sticking to the 3-2-1 formula, you don't need to add any micronutrients at all. You guys are going to ask me about most mix of soluble traces. All this stuff in most is in Jax, and if you are using Jax at the recommended strength, you do not need to add most. If you have some crazy deficiency, then think about it, but this is very, very rare. But if you're going to start making your own formulas, most might be a component you need. But anyway, it's all in Jax. Very, very important. Now, before I get off the micros, you guys are going to ask, well, what about silica and what about sodium and chloride? Well, first off, sodium and chloride are literally table salt, and they are used in such minute amounts that it's hard to add them at all to a formula. And you could take, even if you're using RO water, you could take a quarter of your mix and use tap water, and you would supply your chloride and sodium needs there, and not have any negative effects as you would possibly mixing it into the solution there. Silica is actually not a required element. It's a kind of a beneficial or a secondary. And if you would like to use it and add it into your mix at a recommended rate at which people or companies are telling you to, that's great. It's not going to hurt or anything. Just watch out. Silica, potassium silicate might have a little potassium in it that might affect your things, as well as pH. But if you're going to use it, that's great. So that right there pretty much explains the 3-2-1 formula. Now I want to get into a couple questions about it and how I use it and all that. So the 3-2-1 on formula, I use that full strength basically the full time from the moment I transplant my clones to the time I start flushing my medium. Now that works for me. That works great for me. If you're someone who experiences a little bit of burning or something, maybe you start out with a slightly lesser concentration, but it's still going to be that 3-2-1 formula, just taken down a little bit, maybe 3-2-1 exactly grams per gallon, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, somewhere in there. But for me, I use the 3.6, 2.4, and 1.2, or 1, or whatever, all the way through from veg to flower. And that is the biggest question. You don't change from veg to flower. I don't change from veg to flower. If anything, I'm probably feeding the most concentrated strength right at the end of veg, beginning of flower. There is the strongest feed I'm going to get. So that's kind of the biggest question I get is, do I change it? And I don't. You guys don't believe me, but I swear to God, I don't. And that's because it's such a balanced and complete profile that we don't need to change. You guys are going to ask me about bloom boosters, you're going to ask me about this, you're going to ask me about that, and I'll explain a little bit. But I want to say right now, my best results to date, both in yield, quality, with verified test results, the best runs I've ever had to date have been with the 3-1-4 formula, which is exactly Jax 3-2-1 according to the directions. The NPKs and the general nutrient profile, that is the best I have ever done. Now, I have done my own formula, I have tried others. I'm saying this right now, 3-2-1 is the best I have done. So if you're someone who always is asking, what about bloom boosters, or what about your other formula, or what about this, what about that? If you're not having success with a 3-2-1, then great, go. But if you're looking for success, the 3-2-1, Jax 3-2-1 is the best I have ever come across, period. Now that comes with a couple secondary questions of, I don't add any CalMag, I don't add any bloom boosters, I don't add any of that, but I do add additional products that are more beneficial. Now this NPK is always going to be great and always going to be used, but my secondary products are what are going to facilitate the plant to best use all the ratios that I've given them. And there's honestly not a lot of products that I use, and a lot of them are interchangeable with other brands that you guys might be using. So I'm just going to show you what I've been using, what I use, and how they work for us. First off is straight fulvic acid. Now this is a concentrate, and I get a lot of my extra parts from Custom Hydroponics. They're a great site. I'll link them down below. But this is a 69% fulvic acid powder, smells like top ramen. And what it essentially does is it makes calcium and other certain cations extremely available, and it does that by chelating them. So it's good for flush, it's good for other things, but in general, it just makes your calcium and other nutrients more readily available. It has a little effect on some microbe things, but positively. But more, we're using it to make nutrients more available. That's what I've pushed for a long time, and what I really only use, and it was great. But what I'm using now more days is more of like a multi-microbial solution. So here I have Recharge by Real Growers. It has some bacillus strains, some trichoderma, some kelp, some molasses, fulvic, amino, as well as just basic mycorrhiza. So this has fulvic and humic and plus some others aminos and stuff in it at a lower concentration. So I use this more regularly, and I kind of boost with the fulvic. But that's kind of what I'm doing, and I like this. There's some other products. Skunk Labs makes Microbe Complete. Great White is another product. You know, everyone's trying to basically copy Great White. All these products are great. So whatever you're using, use it. And this is just a beneficial addition that you can do to help facilitate your rhizosphere to uptake all these great nutrients that we're giving them in the purest available forms. So I'm running a lot of Recharge. But everyone's going to ask about these new super microbial products that are coming out, like Mammoth P. And there's one I've been using lately called Tribus Microbes. These are all great products, and if you want to use them in addition to them, I'm never going to recommend against them. I have yet to find a microbial product, beneficial bacteria, or anything like that that has ever impacted in a negative way any kind of nutrient recipe you're feeding it. And if it is, it's more you just can't keep up with the increase that it's giving you. So I've been adding a little bit of these. Honestly, for me personally, it's nothing against Mammoth. I haven't seen Mammoth increase my yields like other things or do anything majorly noticeable. I've also grown some fantastic crops with Mammoth. So who says it didn't work? So if Mammoth is part of your recipe or you want it to be, great. It's going to benefit adding phosphor or doing it's going to do its job. It's going to benefit your recipe. What I've been on recently is Tribus. It's just a bunch of super concentrated bacillus strains, a few of them, and the root growth I've got from it is amazing. Has it completely changed my life in growing? No. The 3-2-1 formula is what gives me all my success. This is what's going to give me a nice healthy root system to uptake and absorb all of that. And again, Recharge or any of these multi-microbes has a lot of what's going on here in just a less concentrated form. So if we're using it more regularly, we'll sustain those. The last thing that I've added over time that I've done over time is just teas, compost teas. Those are extremely effective, extremely concentrated, and extremely active, and those are going to benefit you as much as any of these straight out of the bottle products. So here I have some like Root Assist Tea by Skunk Labs. I like Boogie Brew as well as a tea. These are all fantastic things that you can add, again, to facilitate the uptake of your actual plant available nutrients. Now I've just thrown a bunch of products at you. What do I actually use? I use Fulvic Pure once a month. I'm using Tribus and Recharge at least once a week. Recharge, a light dosage pretty consistently, about 1/4 gram per gallon. This, once a week, little boost, and that's extreme. Now with that said, I can go times where I don't use any of those. These are kind of optional as I feel needed. The meat and potatoes is the Jax and the 3-2-1 formula. So that's always going in when I'm feeding. We are always using that. These are more optional, but I'm telling you, you start to use these bioadditives, especially amino acids are big, the bacillus strains, all these are key to uptake, and so you're just going to benefit your system by using them. So I want to touch on, just bring you up to date on the fact that these are products that have all gone into my system over times you have watched them, but they're not religiously put in, and many of the 3x3 grows have missed out on a lot of these products, and that's kind of possibly why I think some of the runs weren't exactly totally on point. So that is the system, guys. I use 3-2-1, Jax, calcium nitrate, and Epsom salt at a 3.6, 2.4, 1.2 grams per gallon, and adjust if my plants need it accordingly, and I add these. And that is Jack's Hydro and the 3-2-1 formula. So that's the 3-2-1 formula, how I use it and everything, but there's a couple things that I missed earlier on there, and as well as I asked you guys on Instagram if you had any last minute questions, and I got a couple here. And a few of these things kind of all roll into one, and we're going to go to J.R. Peters' website here, the home page, and then we go to products, controlled environment, and this is where you would find Jack's under products. You would find Jack's, calcium nitrate, all these things. This is where we find them. But we want to go to the link on the left here, specifically tips from Jack. Jack is the maker, and general hydroponic growing with 2-part. And this essentially is everything I just explained to you in this whole thing is right here on this page. This is exactly how to use it, as well as a full nutrient breakdown, which I'm going to show you, my own, which matches up with this just for confirmation, as well as it covers some topics here that I wanted to, such as mixing order, pH, and a couple things like that. So specifically mixing order. I mentioned it earlier, calcium doesn't get along with things such as sulfur mostly, and some phosphates, but really it's sulfur, and it reacts and it creates gypsum, which is essentially drywall. So you guys know drywall is not very soluble. It's only like 4% will actually your plants absorb. So that's the issue. And why we would never put these into 1 part in a concentrated solution, and why we mix them separately. So long story short, Jack's goes in first, as well as any Epsom salt that you're going to want to put in. And the reason these is Epsom salt is in Jack's. Jack's is 6% magnesium, and I forget the sulfur percentage. But anyway, they get those percentages straight from Epsom salt. It is in the mix. We need some additional, so we add it. So these two can be mixed together. Mix them, let them dissolve, and then after, we pour our calcium nitrate in. Now, this is because, like I said, they react. These two, calcium nitrate and magnesium sulfate, could possibly react. The reality is that if you were to mix them in and keep them moving around, they probably won't form any participants. So don't freak out, but do mix in 2 parts. And this is why all hydroponic, or most hydroponics, are in like 2 or 3 parts, is because of this possible reaction. Next is pH. I get asked a lot about pH, and it's a good question, and actually I don't take pH all that seriously, and it's because I get lucky. But the pH, if we scroll down continually to the bottom of this page, Jack's hydroponic formula is heavily buffered to produce an ideal working solution pH of between 6.0 and 6.5. So that's the range that they recommend, 6.0 to 6.5. Under unusual circumstances, it may be necessary to adjust pH solution up or down with use of a mineral or organic acid complexes. With use of mineral or acid, please consult water quality. So basically it says it should fall between 6.0 and 6.5. If it doesn't, we should adjust. And you can use that with whatever pH up or down you choose. Jack's has like a citric acid for pH down, and I'm not sure if they have a pH up, but they have a buffer. Anyway, they have it, as well as whatever else you may choose. Just standard general hydroponics, pH up or down, will work as well too. Me personally, if you're going to ask what I do, because I mentioned I don't take it too seriously, I know what my pH in my mix with my water and everything falls in. I've tested it. I don't not pH, but I know how consistent it is, so thus I don't pH every time. I only pH if I have an issue that suggests my pH is off, and that's very rare. And for me, I actually naturally fall from 6.0 to like 6.8, almost 7.0 in the mid to upper 6s, as where they recommend slightly lower. I've never had any major issues where I've had to correct, and for me, I would rather leave it as is than deal with any constant pH dosing, because that just sometimes creates some imbalances, and you could be chasing. That kind of brings me to my next thing that a few of you asked, and also I wanted to bring up, was I mix fresh pretty regularly, as where some people are going to make a concentrated or a stock solution. Now, if you're going to make a concentrate or a stock solution, or have an extremely long-term reservoir, you're going to have to worry about pH drift and other things. I don't have a perfect answer for you, but using Jack's or using this formula isn't going to be any different, or the products that you're going to be looking at aren't going to be any different. You're going to want to adjust and stabilize with the same pH up and down products, and you're just going to have to monitor it. I mix fresh pretty regularly. My reservoirs, if they last a week, that's pretty long. They're usually every 3 to 4 days. And if I start at like 6, sometimes it's 6.0 if I add a few things or this or that. But If I start in that 6 range and I let it drift up to around 7 by the time I'm done, that's a good nutrient pH range that a lot of things are available. And like I said, if I have pH issues, I'll bring it down to where it needs to be. The next one is, how often do I feed? And I feed all the time. Every time I'm adding nutrients to my plant, or every time I'm adding water or anything to my plants, it contains full strength nutrients. They also ask me a lot, I get asked if I flush a lot, or at all, or anything. I don't flush. If I come across a reason that I need to, yes, I will flush. Like if my plants, I notice they don't need that much nitrogen. Some of the indica strains we come across, they don't need as much nitrogen, so we can back off the calcium nitrate a touch. So maybe I'll give 1 feed of straight water, and then the next time I'll make sure I back down the calcium nitrate. But you don't have to do that. I don't have to do that, because there's times where I've felt the need that, oh, maybe I should flush these. And 1 feed of water literally gets me behind to the point where I never catch quite back up to right where I was, to that true, full, lush, vigorous growth. So basically what I'm saying is, this, you can look at the numbers I'm gonna show you here compared to some other ones. We're not feeding at very high concentrations. The highest strength here is 1,000 ppm of pure plant available nutrients, and it's pretty diverse in the sense that we're not just cranking it full of nitrogen or potassium or anything like that. So yeah, I feed every time, but read your plants. That doesn't mean that you feed every time because that's what I said to do. I feed every time because that's what my plants need. So if your plants don't show that they don't quite need it, whatever. But if your plants show you need more, because I know a couple people are like, man, my plants are a little hungrier, you can go above that. So just know that is what we're working with. The next thing is where to buy it. You can buy it from Jack's right here on their website. You go to Jack's, go to products, controlled environment, products again, hydroponic right there, and calcium nitrate, and you hit shop for it, and it'll bring you right to the page. There's also a Amazon link below in the description below if you want to help out me and the channel in any way. Doesn't cost you anything, but Amazon kicks me back a couple percent. Same price, plus I think you might be able to get it Prime, and it comes from JR, so everyone's winning there. Or you can get it straight from the website. Jack's, this is one of the key things, is Jack's price is more competitive than anything out there, and especially in the 25-pound bags. Now I'm showing you these 4-pound tubs here, and they're great. The first time I probably recommend you should do it. And in the 4-pound tubs, it's only 13 cents per gallon cost to you. And when you buy the two 4-pound tubs here, you will get 500 gallons worth of solution with some calcium nitrate left over at the end there. But I buy the 25-pound bags. Computer's gonna fall. But 25-pound bags, you can see the price here. You can go up 25. It's $55. It used to be 50, so it's gone up a touch. But essentially, the 55-pound bags with shipping straight from JR or Amazon, whichever you prefer. It's it was last time I bought it was $162 delivered to my door in a relatively good box. 2 bags come together, slapped. It's a heavy 50-pound box, but $162 to my door, and that creates 4,000 gallons of ready-made solution at the 3.6, 2.4 full strength. 4,000 gallons, and again, you'll have extra calcium nitrate left over at the end because of the difference in weights we use them. But that comes out to 4 cents a gallon for 321, and that's even with $5 for your couple pounds of Epsom salts you have there. It is the best deal in town, and you are getting nothing but the best, purest, most plant available, water soluble nutrients. So that's on top of all the great, actual performance factors that it does. It's the cheapest out there by far, and the reason is because they're feeding fields. The tomatoes you eat from the grocery store, the lettuce, all this stuff is most likely powered by Jack's, hashtag the Blue Crew. Their reach in agriculture is huge. So to us, these small quantities, yeah, they're going to charge you a little bit more to mix it up in this nice little tub, and these tubs work great for watering. So you buy it in the 4-pound first, and then you have these nice little 1-gallon tubs. You can buy it from Jack's, J.R. Peters, their website here, or you can get it from the Amazon link in the description below. Either way, it's up to you. All right, the next one, and it's time to cover the GG formula, which is Green Genes formula, and the Bloom Boosters. These kind of go hand in hand because they can kind of be said one to the other. The profiles are very similar. And now I bring you to my nutrient breakdown page here on the screen, and you can see I have a plethora of formulas. I didn't want to throw these at you earlier, but this is something you can look at, compare. In the first column, we have Jax at full strength, 3.6, 2.4, 1.2. Next, we have Jax 3-to-1 at exactly 3.3-to-1, just so you can see the kind of difference. It's the same ratios, just a little different concentration. After that, we have my I don't want to call it a boost formula, but that's what you guys have heard about it in the updates because it's similar to a bloom booster. It's also very similar to Lucas, and I'm going to talk about that right here. But before we go on, we also have Veg Bloom, GH Lucas formula, Can of Cocoa with PK booster, and then also have some other ones like 1 gram per gallon of Moab, what that'll give you, Cali Magic, and then also Jax Hydro's bloom booster, specifically what they recommend. And some others, and then you can, here you go, here's all the information, you can check it out, do what you got to do here. But what I want to talk about is my formula as well as Jax bloom booster. So I guess we'll talk about Jax bloom booster first. And everyone, because it says bloom booster, everyone wants to use it. And there's very little scientific data, especially with cannabis specific, on the effectiveness of bloom boosters, but the data that's out there for tomatoes and other such crops is very different from how we use it in cannabis late in flower. It's actually a kind of a starter to production, not a late booster. So what Jax actually recommends, if you email them and talk about cannabis specific with them, sometimes I've heard from people like Cannabis Nerd Online and a few others that they'll recommend the bloom booster and somewhere for the first 2 weeks of flower. And that's around the 4.5 grams per gallon is roughly what they recommend to use there. Now you come over here to this column, and this is what it gives you at that strength. It's almost like a 0.75 to 1 to 1.25. It's a very interesting ratio they have going on there. But what you'll notice is it's very incomplete as far as what is going on at the bottom half here. We don't have all those micronutrients, and that's the big difference. This bloom booster also doesn't have pure nitrate. It's got some ammonia in there, so the available nitrogen isn't as well too. So long story short, my opinion on the Jax bloom booster is it's not that great. And if you're going to do it, I would recommend something closer to my formula, and you can manipulate it others. So again, look at the lack of completeness here with that formula. Now let's come over here to my formula. See how that works. Oh, that worked out pretty good. Okay, to my formula there. And notice it checks every box. And that's because the reason I actually did this formula was because with LEDs we constantly have a magnesium. It's the purple stems on the leaves, the petioles. I was trying to fight that. It's never actually been an issue, but people bring it up and I want to try to target it. And I want to see what's going on. It basically comes down to phosphor and it comes down to magnesium. Now we've pumped them full of magnesium in the 3-2-1. That did not seem to do it. So the next, clear move after that is to target phosphor specific for me, and that's what I did. Now that coincides phosphor with a bloom boost, so naturally I called it the booster formula, but like I said, it's a little misleading here. It's very closer to a Lucas 1:1:2 ratio. So that is what I'm running. Now in order to run this, I run Jax, I run calcium nitrate, and I run a product called MKP. Now MKP is monopotassium phosphate, and it is a component of Jax. It is what gives Jax some of its numbers here. But when we apply it directly, it's essentially a phosphorus and potassium or a PK boost. That's exactly all it has in it. And so we're able to change the ratios a little bit. Now, side note, Moab, you'll notice on here, Moab is essentially 95 or 98% MKP with a little MAP, so it's like 2% more phosphor than just straight MKP, and they toss a little B1 in there, or maybe B12. So anyway, if you have Moab sample packs or you have MKP, you can use them more or less interchangeable and get the same effect to do my profile here. So with that said, my profile is 2 grams of Jax, 2.7 grams of calcium nitrate, 2 grams of Epsom salt, and 1.2 grams of MKP per gallon of water. And these are the numbers you'll get. And right off the bat, if we compare it to Jack's over here, we notice just a touch less nitrogen, but not much. I tried to keep those levels somewhat similar because in that it also keeps the calcium we'll get to. But you'll notice almost double, essentially double the phosphor in that mix compared to the standard Jacks. But potassium, I left the same because we don't need to boost potassium much over 200 ppm. Any formula you see out there, the max you'll ever see is like 250, and that's really, really pushing it. And we're not showing any needs for additional potassium. And it's been believed that Jack's are, that 200 mark is kind of up there, and especially for Canada. Anyway, we don't have to boost that much, so it maintains the profile. And I've had extremely successful results with this. Now, I haven't had extremely successful results enough to say that this is the almighty formula, or this does anything better than 3-2-1, and that's why I've been kind of weary to bring it up, and I don't want to call it a booster formula because there's no I have no data showing it boosts. I also have no data showing that it fixed my petiole problem. I still have purple petioles, and I think that it's still and Mammoth P hasn't fixed. Anyway, that's a different story that we're chasing. But this is a highly successful nutrient profile that I've used. And it's comparable to 3-2-1, but it's also comparable to Lucas 1-1-2, which is one of the other cannabis-specific profiles. So what this really tells us is cannabis is just a very adaptive and resourceful plant, and it'll use almost anything you throw at it in whatever ratios, but there are, if we can do it in a balanced and somewhat strategic way, we can definitely capitalize a little bit more, but it's just a freakishly resilient and adaptive plant, and does very, very well. Now, some of these profiles may not work great with lettuce or certain things like that because they're definitely bloom-centric. The potassium, that's a very bloom-centered element there, as well as phosphor and some others, but you'll notice they're low. But these same formulas that I'm saying are bloom work very well in veg because of those nitrogen levels, those calcium levels. And you can see on this level, if we're still looking at my formula, as well as Jack's or even Veg Bloom here right next to it, we got all these. They're very complete. And same with Lucas, they're all complete, and that's the key. So for me, I'd rather just manipulate the NPK, how I just showed you to, than go to Jack's Bloom formula that's lacking in all those micronutrients, calcium, and we'll just make a better formula. And so I give you that recipe. Play with it, but again, I recommend 3-2-1 as the ultimate. Start there. If you have issues, go from here. Leave you with here is, just for fun, nutrients are very, very important, and they make up. Without them, we cannot grow. We cannot produce the quality or the results we do. But they only make up 5% of your dry mass in the end. The rest of it is made up from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they get those directly from the water and the air in CO2 and H2O, and that makes up most of our dry mass. So I just want to leave you with that cool little fact. It's important that we keep our plants happy in all senses. Good environment, good light, it all kind of ties into a good environment, but good light, good diet, good medium, keeping them moist and supplied with water so they can get all their elements, as well as CO2 and a good air quality. If we can do that and supply them in great nutrient profiles like we can achieve with Jack's here, we're going to have great success. Okay guys, that is officially it. Thank you for stopping by. I know this was a long video. It was a lot of information thrown at you. It might make sense to some of you, but if it doesn't make sense to you right now, I gave you guys the cookie cutter formulas that will get you successful results right off the bat. And as you learn and progress on your own individually, you can come back, make more sense of this. It also opens up a can of worms for me and my channel to get you guys more in-depth information. Just as we've blown the covers off the LED and the lighting industry, we can do the same with the nutrient world here, and we can use real plant science and facts to drive our results in our gardens to great success like we're doing. So thank you again. Like this video, subscribe, check out some other videos while you're here. It really does mean a lot to me and the channel. And again, I just appreciate you guys stopping by and nerding out with me for a while. And thank you to J.R. Peters & Jack's. It's a great product. I'm not associated with them or sponsored by them in any way. It's just what I use to get the successful gardens for myself. And I'd like to pass the knowledge on. So thank you, everyone. Peace.